So when I was a senior in high school, I made a new friend. Her name was Susie, and she was really kind and really sweet, but had just enough of an edge that I liked her a whole lot. I went to a small private all-girls school in the city. She went to a large public high school in the suburbs. So I got to experience sort of a typical high school experience through spending time with Susie. And an added bonus was our parents didn't know each other. This will be important later. So for those of you who know me, you know I am fairly methodical. I like lists and plans and spreadsheets. And what you may or may not know is I get that from my mother. Every Friday night, my mother would sit at the kitchen table and write out a menu for the following week: protein, starch, green vegetable. Protein, starch, green vegetable. And then she would write out a shopping list in the order of the grocery store that matched her menu. And every Saturday morning at 9 a.m., she would go grocery shopping for the week. So I grew up in a very regimented household, and that worked very well for me. And it also meant that as long as my routines didn't upset anybody else's routines, I was golden. So very shortly into my senior year, I turned 17, I met Susie, and I started spending every Friday night at her house. At home, I had a curfew. Susie's parents didn't set a curfew. As long as I was home by 9 a.m. on Saturday so my mom could go grocery shopping, no one really asked any questions. Now, this was before cell phones, and remember, our parents didn't know each other. So every Friday night, I'd go out to the suburbs and hang out with Susie and her friends, and we'd sit in the Denny's in the smoking section, but I never smoked. Or we would go to parties where people's parents were out of town, but I never drank. I came home to Susie's house after curfew, and as long as I got home by 9 a.m., no one was the wiser. So I didn't have a boyfriend. I did have lots of crushes, and this was all well and good until one of those crushes responded. See, Chris, let's call him Chris, was a little bit older than I was, had his own place in the suburbs, other side of the city, and we'd been friends for a really long time, the way I was friends with lots of guys back then. I just had a crush on them and hung around until maybe they reciprocated it. Except that rarely happened until it did. One Friday night, a friend of Chris's was playing a show that I wanted to go to. Except I had an 11 p.m. curfew, so I couldn't go home after the show. And I explained this to Chris. I would need a place to crash if I went to see the show. And he was game. Now, I'd like to point out right now that this is all my parents' fault, and if I didn't have a curfew, I would have just gone home after the show. But I had a curfew. They assumed I was at Susie's. I didn't have to be home till 9 a.m. So there you go. This is really all my parents' fault. Now, the other thing that I should pause and say is that my mom and I were super close. She knew all my crushes. She knew all about my crushes. We spent a lot of time together. There were some mornings, no matter how late Susie and I had stayed out the night before, I would go grocery shopping at 9 a.m. with my mom just to spend time with her. So lying to her was a little outside of my wheelhouse. But when I tell you that Chris was the hottest guy on the face of the earth, you can understand how my brain got a little scrambled. So that first night, we went to the show, we went back to his place, we crashed, I woke up at 9 in the morning. Eventually, this became as much a routine as my nights at Susie's. Most Friday nights I would spend with her, and some Friday nights I wouldn't. But that Friday night, I was buzzing with so much energy, I barely slept at all. And as I left the apartment at 8 o'clock in the morning to get my mom's car home by 9, I took a minute on the fire escape and thought, I'm probably busted right now. And it was so worth it. As it turns out, this routine very quickly became boring. literally, we would sit around his place, make dinner, watch movies, spend the night, get home by 9 a.m. And it stopped being even exciting to me. It just was what I did. And while I was sure my parents were going to find out, they never did, until I went ahead and wrote a novel about a girl who sounds an awful lot like the girl in this story. Thanks.